As I first introduce myself, I'm Annette Gomez, a business coach here at Outcomes Business Group, and today I'm with our founder, David Guest, and we are discussing starting a successful business. So, David, I have had a few businesses. Mm-hmm. I've had some great successes and also a complete disaster.
Mm-hmm. Haven't we all?
One of my, biggest challenges starting a business was when I was actually trying to start my coaching business. It was about 2 or 3 years, and I knew I had the knowledge, I knew I had the experience, but I just could not get going. So I would like to ask you how to start a business. Oh, sorry, before I say that, I should introduce you more. So the reason I actually found you, and I was so happy that I did. Here you are, almost 20 years in business.
20 years in a coaching business.
Great team.
Yeah.
And you have lots of systems in place. And you're very successful. So tell us, how do you get started?
Well, I'll sort of answer your story. It's a big question, and we are going to answer that during this webinar. But my background, I started working in business when I was 5 years old. I don't know anyone else out there who's been in this situation, but my parents were immigrants into the country. They didn't speak English very well. They couldn't get a job. The only thing they could do was run their own business. And since we were all kids, we used to work for free, basically, or 50 cents a day, but it was tax-free. My experience then was not great because I was young, but what I observed is my parents said, I'm going to run this business so that we can save money to send you to university to get a degree so you can be successful. And I didn't think anything of it at the time. I thought that's just what parents do. So we went through this whole process, and I watched my parents run these small businesses, several of them, by the way. And some were really successful. We were into demolition. We were into creating artwork. We had stalls in the market. Then they moved into clothing. And I just tagged along for the ride and didn't know anything different because rather than having a babysitter, they had me as an employee who was basically doing nothing. But what was interesting for me is later on, because they did save the money, they tried to send me to uni, but I was the worst student ever. Right? I didn't actually make it through high school. I dropped out in year 12. It was all too hard for me. And their dreams were crushed because they said you can be whatever you like, a doctor or a lawyer in those days, and I chose neither. So I became an electronics technician, which was exactly the opposite of what they expected. But the whole time I'd always been experienced in sort of being in a family business. And after a while of working, I started to realise that working for someone else is okay because it gives you security. It gives you the ability to have holidays. It gives you the ability to have some structure around what you do. And obviously, depending on how educated you are, your pay scale is according to that. So I started getting the itch. And the itch was, I think I want to run my own business, even though my parents never wanted me to. But the distinction was I was trying to work out what makes a successful business. So there's a couple of books that I'm going to mention during the call, and I might even get Simone to type them up onto the screen as we go. But the first book I recommend to anyone going into business is The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. I think we've got a copy here.
Oh, we do.
There you go. So this book here, if you haven't got this yet and you're thinking about going into business, go and buy it. It's on Amazon. You can get it from Book Depository, so you don't pay shipping. It's going to cost you $20 odd, but it's going to teach you about building a business system. Can't put it back now. That's okay. And really, look, I read that book before I started my first business. And here's the upside and the downside. The upside is lots of good knowledge and information on how to build a business system. The downside is it doesn't tell you how to implement. It just tells you the data. So I read that book and I thought, that's it. I know how to run a business and make money. And I went into my first business that I ran of my own, which was IT, selling computers and computer repairs. And it was really self-employment because it was my own business. And I started running this thing and I started realizing there's way more to this than just knowing how to fix computers. So from there, I sort of started that business. I ended up getting bogged down and doing the work every day. I shut it down. I moved into running a supermarket chain. Well, two stores, let's call it a chain because it's a chain of two. And that was my second venture in business where I still got stuck. So I was the guy opening the doors in the morning and sweeping the floors at night.
Yeah.
And then I shut that one down. And I had a realization because I had 2 failures in business by the time I was about 27. And my realization was that knowledge is one thing, but application is something totally different. So kept reading all the books, kept learning all the information, and started to learn that one of the most important elements of being successful in business is the ability to sell. So I took on a sales career from that point. So I had no sales experience whatsoever, and I moved into the world of sales. In there, I sort of learned sales. I read books on sales. I went to seminars on sales, and I watched videos on sales. In those days, it was CDs, it was tapes in the car. And so I learned my sales knowledge, and I started to build up a whole sort of knowledge base around how to run a business properly. That career lasted about 10 years. And I went from knowing nothing about sales to becoming a sales trainer within the organisation with a number of salespeople reporting to me. And that's when I sort of went back again, and I said to my boss at the time, I said, I'm out of here. He goes, why? Isn't there enough money? I said, money's not the problem. I have an itch that I need to scratch, and that's running my own business successfully. So I left. And that's one of my hardest questions to answer when I started is, what business should I be in?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of startups out there, entrepreneurs, they go, I don't know what business I'm going to be in, but I just know I should be in business. And the reason they want to be in business is they believe they can control their destiny. Mm-hmm. They believe they can control the paycheck. Mm-hmm. And so now they're trying to find the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. So which industry should I move into? I sort of cheated because I discovered the business coaching industry, which meant I could go into a business that is not a vertical, but it's horizontal. And what I mean by that is I'm involved in every business that exists. So I actually found the business that fit me perfectly. I couldn't decide which business to go into, so I went into a business that works with all businesses.
Excellent, excellent. So you've told us really how you got started by your sales knowledge and really gathering knowledge. Yes. But how did you know whether your idea was going to work?
That's a really good question. What's happened, and I suppose it's a bit of a shift, because when I started 20 years ago, the internet just started. And so knowledge was something that was not easily found, and you had to either find an expert, and this sounds funny, but there was only one bookshop in the whole of Melbourne that sold sales and motivational books, and it was in Box Hill. And they had mail order, or you could go to the store, but it was the only one. Right? There was no sort of Barnes & Noble really didn't have business books. There was no Amazon. There was none of these things. So when I started, I suppose the answer is simple. There's another book that I'd recommend, which is called The Lean Startup.
Okay.
Right, The Lean Startup talks about how people should go into business using the minimum amount of money by creating what's called a minimum viable product. Because if you think your idea is good, that's just an opinion, right? And until you go to a market, and the market by definition is a group of people that would be interested in purchasing that product and ask them to part with their hard-earned cash, it's all theory. So when people ask, where do I start? The answer is, if you have an idea, the idea is not as valuable as the implementation. And what I mean by that is people get precious about their idea, and they have non-disclosure arrangements. They don't want to talk to anyone in case someone steals their idea. In reality, the idea is the least valuable part of the business startup. It's the execution that's valuable.
Yeah.
So if you have an idea, you need to find the right people to float the idea by and get an opinion as to whether they think it's viable. It's still an opinion until someone parts with cash. Okay, so testing a business idea these days is so much simpler than it used to be. Because in those days, we didn't have internet advertising. So if you wanted to test whether your product would sell, you had to put an ad in the paper or in a magazine, and you would have to put a phone number there and wait for the phone to ring. These days, you can use Google AdWords. You can turn it on within 15 seconds. You can test a headline. You can test an offer. You can get people to go to a landing page, and you can sort of now measure the interest in a product. You can also do the research on keywords. So look at what people are looking for online. So there's a whole lot of data available as to what people want, what people are looking for, and what they're willing to pay for.
Okay, so that's great. We're going to test our product, and we're going to see whether there's a demand for it, I guess. So then what's the next step to actually physically get our product to market?
Yes. Okay. So now we move into the logistical side. So let's assume we've got an idea and we've gone to market and the initial signs are positive. Okay. I've got this idea. Everyone I talk to thinks it's awesome. When I start to advertise it, people are willing to part with their cash even though they don't have a product. When we talk about minimum viable product, we're talking about even going online and setting up a registration page, even a shopping cart to buy the product even though it doesn't exist. Now, what you don't do is you don't take people's money out of their credit card. You just see if they're willing to pay.
Okay.
So when they hit the submit button, you actually take them to another page saying the product is not in stock at this point in time. We have your records on details, and we have your name on record, and we can notify you later.
Isn't that how people sell a book without even writing a book?
Yes, and it's also how eBay works. And
Okay.
if anyone has heard the story of Kogan, which is a very successful importer of TVs into the country, Ruslan Kogan started his whole business on the premise that he wanted to buy a TV cheap.
Okay.
So he said, I don't want to pay $2,000 for a television. I want to pay wholesale. So we bring all the manufacturers in China and say, how much for a TV? And they'd say $250. He'd go, I'll take one. They said, no, you don't understand. You have to buy 100. He said, I don't want 100, I want one. So what he did is he went on eBay and he took a photo of the TV he wanted and he put it up for sale with 6-week delivery.
Clever.
Now, when you sell stuff online, the distinction is when people go to a retail shop, they don't pay until they have the product. When people buy online, they pay in advance. So he had all these people saying, I want that TV for $500. And they put the money into his bank account, and all he had to do was sell 50 of them at $500. He had enough money to buy 100 TVs.
Okay.
And he also had a delivery window. Now, one of the problems was he had to get the TVs here on time to deliver, or else he was in trouble. But the first couple of times, and he tells the story better than I do, but he's an entrepreneur who was willing to take a risk. So in his scenario, he started a business with $0.
Okay.
Right, he had a product that he could source. He really had no idea of the quality, and he had no idea of delivery time, just promises from a Chinese company. But he managed to swing it around and take the first punt. The last time I heard about Kogan, they've got 40 to 60 shipping containers on the water at any point in time, bringing product into the country. They've now also bought the rights for Dick Smith Online.
Wow.
So.
Well, that's a really clever strategy. So, you know, I know for me, so that's obviously he started that with nothing. It's just the strategy. For me, I've started a business with $50 that turned into a successful business, and I've also spent like $500,000 in one, which was a complete disaster.
Yeah.
So, and this is a question we get from a lot of starters. They get really stuck because they think that it costs a lot of money to start a business.
Yes.
So, apart from that story, in your opinion, how much do you think that it really you should have behind you to start a business?
One of the most asked questions when people go into business is, where do I get funding? And it's an interesting question because it sort of is assumed that that's what's stopping them from being successful. Now, money is an interesting thing in its own right because money is one of the most commoditized products on the planet. Now, what I mean by that is a dollar is worth $1. Now, it's not worth $1.05, it's not worth 95 cents, it's worth $1, which means there's no difference between the dollar in your pocket and the dollar in my pocket. They're all $1. What the real issue is how do I get people to part with their dollar based on my idea? So we've got some amazing resources available to business people who want to start a business, which is crowdfunding. In the old days when I started, the only way you could get money was you knocked on the door of the bank, and they were super intimidating because you had to sit in their office and they looked at you and said, I don't know if we're going to lend you the money. If you're lucky, we might be able to do something for you. And then what would happen is it sort of got more sophisticated, and then mortgage brokers came along and you could do things to get money through the banks. Then the venture capitalists show up. And the venture capitalists are great, right? Because they're willing to give angel investment. Like they're willing to say, we'll fund you, but we're going to take the majority of your business. We're going to make you work like a dog. And really, the whole idea of having a venture capitalist involved in my business, even though it sounds enchanting, is actually totally devastating to a lot of people. The reason they did it, and it even, like if you watch Shark Tank or you watch any of those shows on TV, those guys do that. They say, we'll give you the money, but you work for us now. Now, for some people, they go, well, I'd rather have that than nothing. So I think like the funding part of it is really about how in tune you are with your idea and how willing you are to go to market. You can crowdsource anything. You can crowdsource a holiday by going to Kickstarter.com or any of those websites and saying, I want to go on a holiday, I want to document it, and I'm going to sell the DVD at the end, and if you give me $20, I'll give you a copy of the DVD. And people have crowdfunded all sorts of weird things, business ideas, just by doing that. Sharing the idea, being able to pitch it. So when I talked about having sales skills, it's not just about selling your product. It's about selling your idea to investors. It's about selling your idea to employees. Right? Some people, when they're starting up, they need help. They need help from people who are web designers. They need help from people who have got product on the shelf. And unless you can convince those people that your idea is sound and going to make money, you're dead in the water. So sales skills are a non-negotiable to me for anyone who thinks they're entrepreneurial, regardless of whether it's a startup for a new idea or whether it's just starting a plumbing business.
Cool. So just recapping on everything, can you summarize really the critical steps you need to take your business off the ground?
Look, there's a couple of things here, and I will refer to books because I've been a learner all my life. And, the thing I've learned about learning is the more you learn, the more you earn,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or learning is just earning with L plates on.
Yep.
Right.
Mhm.
And so the reality is I've read hundreds of books on business, and I keep reading them because every time I read one, I get a great idea. One of the best books I've ever read is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yes, I've read that.
Right. Stephen Covey. I don't think we have that one. No, we don't have that one here. But in that book, one of his habits is to begin with an end in mind.
Mhm.
And I think my biggest frustration in coaching businesses for the past 20 years, and the number of people I speak to, is when I ask them the question, what is your objective in business? We usually get very weak goals.
Yeah.
And so the first step, I think, once you have an idea that you feel is sound, is to define how far you want to take it. So what is the end? And this is a really interesting question. I'll get the guys on the call to probably write this one down, is what will my business look like when it's finished?
Mm-hmm.
Because if I go to a builder and I say, look, I want you to build me a house, and the guy says, no problem, how many stories? And you go, I don't know. Just start building and I'll tell you as you go. He looks at you like you're nuts because it's illegal.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He can't pour a foundation if he doesn't know how many floors you're going to create.
Yeah.
So many people I meet go into business and they say, all I want to do is get a few clients and test my product out. The next question is, well, what happens if it's successful? Well, then I'll get more clients. And that's exactly the same as telling the builder, just build and I'll tell you how many stories I want once we get there.
Yeah.
So beginning with an end in mind in business means if everything goes as planned, how big is this thing?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Is it statewide? Is it national? Is it global? We talk about global businesses these days like it's nothing, because the reality is internet allows us to be a global business
Mhm.
right now, even from startup. You can be in your back bedroom at home, turn on your computer, and you've got access to resources all around the world and also a market that is global. So the real question is, what is your ultimate goal in the business? If it's successful, how big is it going to be?
Yeah.
So if it was finished, when we say finished, it's an interesting question because it also means how are you going to exit? Okay. Now, when I say exit, I don't mean you should build a business and then just leave, because exit could be that it runs under management.
Mm-hmm.
Exit could be that you go public, you float the thing. Exit could be that you just shut it down. Now, reality in Australia is 80% of businesses that try to sell, just fold.
Yeah.
Because they've got no intrinsic value. And so when we talk about what will my business look like when it's finished, I want you to give me the picture, the optimistic picture of how many customers you've got, how many products move off the shelf, what's the revenue, what's the profitability, how many offices do you have if it's office driven? So give me a picture of what the ideal business looks like for you.
Cool. So talking about that, I mean, what happens if you start your business and you do become super successful? I mean, we get a lot of business owners now who have had their businesses for a little while and they're completely in chaos. So there must be something when you're starting a business that you need to set up so that you don't end up in chaos.
Yes. Look, to me, chaos comes from 4 things.
Mm-hmm.
All right. The first one is not knowing where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
So really what you do is you go to work every day and all you're doing is running around in circles, stamping out flyers. And I know a lot of people who are in business exactly know what I mean by that.
Yeah.
And the reality is they call it a time management issue, but in reality, I think it's a priority management issue. Because if I'm too busy putting out fires all day, I'm going to be exhausted and I'm going to run on this treadmill called a business for 20 years. Now, sometimes I meet people and they've been in business 20 years and they say, I've got 20 years experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I challenge them and say, I don't think you've got 20 years experience. I think you've got 1 year experience photocopied 20 times, because they're running around in circles. So the first part of getting out of chaos is knowing where you're going and really sitting down and defining that end result. What will my business look like when it's finished? Bring it back to 5 years, 3 years, and 1 year. The second part of that is time management. And that's really saying I've got 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, just like everyone else. And the question is, what do I do during that time?
Mm.
Now, when I'm starting up my business, I don't have employees. So guess what? It's all me. So I'm going to run out of time.
Mm-hmm.
So the real question is, when I run out of time, what got done and what didn't get done? So we have to prioritize all the activities that we're doing within our day. If that makes sense. So if we're starting up a business, we can spend a hell of a lot of time building up our logo and our business card and our brochure and our website.
And our trusts and
right. And so we can spend tens of thousands of dollars on the setup for a business where the product's never been tested.
Yeah.
For me, I test the product before I go and build the logo.
Mm-hmm.
Right. The other thing you want to be wary of is if there's any intellectual property.
Yes.
Right. How much can I protect it minimally before I prove the product? Because if I go through the whole protection mechanism and go, let's go global rights on the brand name, and it's going to cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars that I don't have.
Yeah.
Right. So we have to test our product in a way where we're not going to lose control of the intellectual property, but we're going to prove a market. So there's a bit of balancing there. Right. So the time management aspect is really around what are the stepping stones to get me confirmed that the product is viable, to make sure that once I've got a certain amount of sales, I now go into protection mode, to make sure that I have got cash flow because I have to pay for all this stuff, or to make sure my investors can see light at the end of the tunnel. Because it's not a question of is there money available. The real question is why should I give you mine? Right? Because if someone knocks on my door and says, I've got a brilliant business idea and I'd like you to invest in it, my first question is, what's my return and how much do I trust you to deliver?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And talking about the something's come to mind here, you're talking about investors. And so, it's a lot of pressure on a person trying to start a business and then they're looking for investors and then they're kind of confused with how to get their product to market, but then also the guilt that comes around investors
Well, there's an obligation, right? You go to an
exactly.
investor and say, lend me some money, and they're going to say, no problem, but I need to see everything.
Yeah.
Not only do they need to see everything, they're now going to give you their opinion on how you should run your business.
Yeah.
As we move through the chaos to control, the first thing we mentioned was goals and time management. The next thing we need to do is know our numbers.
Yep. Okay.
So I'm talking about key performance indicators, I'm talking about revenues, I'm talking about profitability. So we need to start doing spreadsheets that are projecting where the profit is in this business.
Okay.
The investor's not going to give you the money unless they can see a sound return.
Yeah.
Now, the weird thing is you can go to a bank with a projection that you make up, and they look at it and go, is it reasonable? And if they say yes, they'll give you the money. It was made up. An investor is probably a bit more concerned about how willing they are to give money because they've got no backup. There's no house as collateral in this situation. It's generally throwing money on the table. So the numbers are critical, and understanding how to read a profit and loss and a balance sheet, how to create a cash flow forecast and a budget is critical to get out of chaos. Okay.
Yeah.
And the final thing that I would say to get people out of chaos is to talk about how you deliver your service. Because there's an old saying, it costs 6 times more to get a new customer than it does to get an old customer to come back or refer. So if you're not building your business model that's based on repeat business, loyalty, or referrals, you end up spending way too much on marketing.
Yeah, and one of the, I guess the biggest challenges I've come across with startups is that they think they're going to open their doors and their business is going to be flooded full of people. So, we can even go into marketing a little bit there.
We'll touch on that too.
Yeah.
So don't get me wrong, I'm just talking about getting out of chaos first, right?
Yeah.
So before we start turning the marketing tap on in the business, we need to make sure that we've got a way of helping clients. Okay, so in our testing mode, we're doing some testing. We might spend some money on marketing, but we're not turning on the floodgate yet. Because we can drown a business, and most businesses go broke because they're growing too quickly. What I mean by that is they put all their money into marketing, they get all these leads, they just cannot deliver the service in an appropriate manner, so they're not holding clients. And so they need to go spend more money on marketing. Now, when we talk about marketing in principle, it should be an investment, not an expense. And that just means I need to know what my return is, which brings me back to knowing my numbers. So as a business startup, you need to have a sense of figures. You need to use those numbers to mitigate risk. And then what you can do is start looking at marketing as something that I can spend money on because I know how quickly I can get it back.
Okay.
So the marketing is the next stage of the business, and that's where the business will start to grow. Inevitably, and one of the things that we've actually created here, and it's sort of come out of our discussions and understanding how many entrepreneurs there are out there that have great ideas. And they almost have an obligation to take that idea to market, but they really don't know how to run a business. So we've sort of developed the concept of Outcomes Business School. And the Outcomes Business School is literally just a set of business skills that an entrepreneur can use to actually get through the time management, the goal setting, the understanding of numbers, and the understanding of how to deliver a service so that they can build this business without sort of losing control of it. One of the things, and you'll notice, our vision in our company, reinvigorating the business dream. The reason I chose that as our vision is I watch too many people who have this great idea for a business. They go out there and they get smashed.
Yes.
And several times. And after a while they give up. They go, I've tried so many times, I give up. The problem is they had a great idea. They just didn't know how to launch it. And you hear all these stories about companies that steal other people's intellectual property. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg did it with Facebook. He stole it off the twins. McDonald's did it when Ray Kroc stole the idea off the McDonald's brothers. It's not stealing. Because all of those entrepreneurs will just say they didn't know how to get the product to market. So they said they don't deserve to hold the intellectual property if they're not willing to share it with the world.
And there's the worst feeling is when you have an idea and then years later you see it out there, and it happens.
Yeah. And the reason is because you didn't know how to implement and someone else has actually worked out the implementation cycle. So it's not the idea that's the value.
No.
The idea is the implementation. Sorry, the value is the implementation. Yeah. So people have to learn how to take a product to market. They have to learn how to actually make sure it's profitable.
Mm-hmm.
They have to learn how to then control the marketing. So they're not just blowing money on marketing, they're actually investing in marketing.
Yep.
And the next thing that's going to happen is a scale issue. Because if I'm a one-man band, I'm going to run out of capacity. Now, it doesn't mean I need to employ people. I can contract, I can outsource, I can do all sorts of things to get people to help me, but I can't do it on my own.
That's right. So if I was in a startup, like how do I know who to employ first or who to bring on into my business?
Great question. Okay, going back to the first book I mentioned, The E-Myth Revisited, one of the things Michael Gerber talks about is build your business as if you're going to franchise it. And he says, don't franchise it, just build it as if you were. And what he's saying is build a business system.
Okay.
And part of your business system is defining each role within the business, making sure that you're clear what the expectation of an employee is. Because there's no such thing as bad employees. There's just bad recruitment and bad training.
Yeah.
Right? People do what they're told to do. And if they don't work for you any longer. Mm-hmm. So if you're not clear on the roles within the business and you go to market to find employees, you're creating a sort of formula for disaster. And I think it's an interesting question. Most people put off employment until they've got enough cash flow to cover wages. That's the worst thing to possibly do because as a one-man band, if I've got enough cash flow to cover wages, chances are I'm flat out. How much training can I give someone when I'm flat out just making enough money to cover their wage?
Yeah.
The right way to employ is to start from day one by creating the systems so you can define the functions so that when someone does work for you, they know exactly what they're supposed to be doing and you can tell if they're doing their job.
Okay.
So there's an old saying, most people hire fast because they're desperate and they fire slow because they try to hang on to people and try and fix them. The reality is we should be hiring slow and firing fast.
Okay.
So I think the understanding as a business owner that you will need people means that you have to learn how to manage people. And that's really through systems, through training, through job descriptions, through organizational structure. So understanding all the functions of the business and defining what a person's job is.
Okay.
So once we've got our marketing working, the next thing we need to be quite comfortable with is that we're going to grow. And as we grow, we need to find people to help us.
Okay.
Now, to find the right people means be clear on what you're looking for.
Okay.
Okay, these are all the steps to growing a successful business. The way we minimize risk is by learning how to do numbers properly, learning how to market properly, and by the way, marketing, most people talk about things like social media and Facebook. And what happens is they ask the question, is Facebook a good marketing strategy? And the right answer to that depends on who you are and what your product is and where your target market is.
Yeah.
So marketing to me is not about which channel should I use. It's about how do I find my market and how do I get them to engage.
Okay. Wow, there's definitely a lot to learn. I was just going to say to you, so like, I'm an emotional person. So let's talk about what stops people starting their business.
Yeah.
I mean, fears are massive things.
Yes.
I mean, we hear about dream stealers. You tell your idea to people who, the wrong people, and your mind monkeys where you really stop, you stop yourself from going forward because of your own beliefs. So how did you get past all the fears to take the next step?
Okay, so it's a good question because inevitably the thing that stops people most is fear. It's fear of failure, it's fear of success, it's fear of the unknown. And the fears, there's an old saying that fear stands for false evidence appearing real. Because we manufacture all of these things that could happen and we use them as excuses to procrastinate. This is not my year. When I've got enough money in the bank, when the kids grow up, And so we use these dependencies to procrastinate, which may never eventuate, which just pushes our idea into the never, never. I think the way to mitigate the fear issue is to start putting your idea on paper, start actually creating a plan that's going to move you in the right direction and sharing that plan with a trusted person.
Yeah.
Okay? Because if you don't do that, your idea will either die or someone else will find it in the universe. They might not find it in your writing, but you'll sit there one day and say, that was my idea. And they stole it. Right? That happens a lot. And it's not that they stole it, it's just that you had it given to you on a platter and you had the opportunity to execute and you chose to procrastinate. Yeah. So the managing of fear is important, but the simple solution to managing fear is knowledge.
Yeah.
Okay. The more I read business books, the more it just gives me confidence in my abilities to find the right people, to go down the right channels, to discover the new marketing channels, the new ones. Like, people are scared of things like Instagram and Snapchat, all these things.
Yeah.
And why are they scared of them? Because they're new. But in reality, we're always selling to people. It's just how do we communicate with those people? So the fear can be alleviated by education. The fear can be alleviated by getting your idea in writing and sharing it with someone who can help you expand your idea into a step-by-step plan.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but when I taught my kids how to ride bikes, they all start with the training wheels, and you wait until they get a bit of confidence, and then you have to hold the seat behind them, and they ride, and you hold it. You're holding on, Dad? Yeah, I'm holding on. You're holding on, Dad? Yeah, I'm holding on. And then sooner or later you let go, but you don't tell them. And they start riding. You're holding on, Dad? You go, yeah, but you're like 5 meters back.
Yeah.
They turn around, they go, he's not holding on. One of two things going to happen. They're either going to go, woohoo, I'm riding, or more than likely they're going to crash.
Yeah.
But what we've proven to them is that they can actually ride.
Yeah.
Okay?
Exactly.
And in business, I think the fear is that what happens if I stuff it up? Well, minimize your risk, right? The best thing we can do in business is fail. But no one likes to fail.
No.
So what we do is we make sure the failures are small, right?
Yeah.
I'd rather have small failures and fail more frequently than have one big catastrophe. Because you mentioned one of your businesses with 500,000 issue on the table. That's a big failure to me.
Absolutely. It's not good when you're facing bankruptcy. I'll tell you that for sure.
Yeah.
So one of the key things I think that I've learned as well is consistency. I've tried to start businesses and I've been all over the place. It's like because you end up in working in desperation mode rather than system mode. And I think that's what I've learned from you coming to work as a coach at Outcomes is, having your systems in place. It stops all that lack of consistency.
Yeah, absolutely. So another way to reduce fear is to have a predictable result.
Yep. Yes.
And one of the things that we teach this in marketing is, hypothetically, if I could give you $1.50 for every dollar you gave me, guaranteed, how much would you give me?
Yeah.
And after people get it, they go, well, as much as I've got.
Yeah.
So what we need to do is make our business productive. We need to make sure that we have a consistent return on investment in our marketing, and we need to be aware of how that's all going to work. So learning how to do numbers is part of reducing risk, because risk is mitigated by doing the calculations.
Yeah.
And often people are in fear because they just have self-talk going on about, oh my God, what happens if this happens? I don't want to tell anyone in case I'm successful.
As our mind monkeys.
Yeah. So we've had a question come up, which is how much is business school? It's a good question. We haven't actually established the price right now because we're building. What we're thinking at the moment, and we've developed a program that's going to run over 6 months. It's going to be weekly. It's going to be all online, and it's going to be at lunchtime. So people who are still in a job and thinking about starting a business can still check out for lunch, plug in, and get connected. The 6-month program, we're developing the lessons in it right now. And we're looking for people who are interested. So anyone who's interested can go to the website and put in an expression of interest. We'll have that pricing settled probably within the next few weeks. And once we have, you'll be the first to know. Okay. So I suppose for us, exactly like what we just described, we need to see if there's a market.
Yes.
And whether our product fits the market before we sort of finish it. So it's at sort of 70-80% completion, but we just need that feedback from people, what they want to get out of business school before we can finalise exactly what it's going to be. Going back to what you were saying, people have to learn to fail faster.
Okay.
That minimises risk. So putting $10 on social media advertising and losing it doesn't hurt you. Putting $5,000 hurts. People who are starting up have very little money spare. And what they should be doing is working out, how do I get the best bang for buck until I've proven my product, until I can establish cash flow. So that's how we do it. We just minimise the risk by taking small steps. Make sure you get some advice, right? Because there's a lot of people out there that have done this before that can steer you in the right direction. Because I think when you're isolated, one of the problems of running your own business is lonely.
Oh, definitely.
What I mean by that is you're sitting on your own saying, will this work? I don't know. And you're very biased in your view, right? Because it's your baby, you've invented this thing and you think the whole world should have one. So you don't ask anybody because you think you know. And so you'll go and build a container load of the widget and have it shipping to your front door, and then you'll come to me and say, Dave, I've got this problem. I've got this widget. How do I sell it? So it's very difficult.
And I think also you get, when you're in business by yourself, you get distracted. You know, you're trying to get this startup happening, but you get so distracted with everything else that's going on and all the white noise out there about what you're hearing, and it's not easy.
It's not, and you know, one of the questions that just came through is why is outcomes? What makes us different to another business coach?
Mm-hmm.
It's a really good question.
It is,
because business coaching, unfortunately, is an unregulated industry, which means anyone can be one.
Yep.
Right, and what that means is you can have a business coach that's really just a marketing person who does marketing, or someone who's really just good with numbers, like a finance person or an accountant.
Yeah.
Outcomes, we've been doing this for 20 years, and we cover the whole gamut of business. So we do sales, we do marketing, we do systemization, we do recruiting, we do finances, we do goal setting, we do time management. The reason we do all of it is because a business coach's function is to be like a personal trainer. Mm-hmm. First thing we need to do with any client we work with is say, what are you trying to achieve?
Yes.
And so goal setting is paramount. The second part of it is, for me, business education is non-negotiable. Mm-hmm. Right? The more you learn, the more you earn. We've been doing business training for nearly 15 of the 20 years that we've been going as a separate part of our business. So we do classes on how to market, how to sell, how to create systems, and all these how-to classes are part of what we're actually providing to it as a service to our clients. I think, you know, when I look at a lot of other coaches, they're working from home and they're working on predominantly one area, and which is great, because I think some of those coaches are brilliant at what they do. But as a business owner, I'm juggling so many balls that if I go to a marketing guy and he's coaching me on marketing, he might not be looking at my goal setting. He might not be looking at my recruitment or my business system, just because it's outside of his visibility. Yeah. For us, our success has been sort of created by the fact that we've coached hundreds and hundreds of business owners, from startups to people who've been in business for 50 years. Mm-hmm. And really what we're looking for is the gaps. And so we've identified all those gaps and we've brought them back together and said, look, you know, to minimize your chance of failure as starting a business, these are the things that you must have.
Exactly.
All right. So that's the business education that we're doing.
Exactly. And I think one of the biggest differences and why I ended up collaborating with you myself is that when I got here, it's like, you know, you've got 7 coaches here. So, you know, it's not just one mind. So any business problem, we've got, I don't know, hundreds of years of experience, you know, all together. And it's like we've come across all problems before, and we've got not just one mind working on businesses, we've got 7 minds together. Yeah.
And interestingly enough, we are growing in that space as well. So we're constantly on the lookout for business coaches to join our team. Now, there's an old saying, and it's really Jack Welch, who's renowned for running GE over in the States. And he said something that sort of resonated with me years ago, and it was a funny term. It was eat your own dog food. And when I was in sales, it sort of occurred to me that if you're going to sell something, you better believe in it. And for you to believe in it, you either have used it before or you're 100% behind what you're selling. So for me, we sell business coaching, which is teaching people how to be successful. Every single aspect of what we put into our coaching programs, we can demonstrate within our own business. So you being here is not an accident, because one of the questions I asked when I had to scale my business is, what's going to make a high-performing coach want to work for me? Because why wouldn't they just do it on their own? And it was a real problem, right? Because I was competing with other people who were successful. And the answer was simple. A high-performing coach is probably bogged down by administrative paperwork, bogged down by trying to find customers, bogged down by really being lonely and being isolated. So we developed the environment to make sure that there was a collaborative approach, number one, made sure that we take care of all the admin, right? We provide a structure so that the coaches do what they love doing, which is coaching. And that's the only reason a high-performing coach would ever want to join us here. Because if it was just a simple arrangement where you can use my brand, it's a bit weak for me. And you know, for some people in business, their biggest fear of employing high-performing people is that they steal your intellectual property and they go and replicate it. Now, that's quite valid, right? But if you think about it, if you keep building your intellectual property and you keep developing and advancing it, it's uncopyable. Exactly. And I'll give you a really good example. IKEA's been around for 30 years now. IKEA is like a machine. The whole business is systemized from when you enter the car park till when you lose a screw. Right? And it's so systemized that it actually is super highly profitable. But you do not see a clone of IKEA because no one can copy such a sophisticated system. Right? Bunnings. came and dominated the marketplace, for hardware.
Mm-hmm.
And Masters came along and said, oh, we can copy Bunnings' system, but we'll do it better because we'll provide better service. Well, what happened there? I mean,
Masters are gone.
huge investment to try and copy someone else's idea, but they couldn't beat them, right? Because Bunnings had too much momentum in the market.
Mm-hmm.
So the trick to stop people copying you and stealing your intellectual property is to be advancing quicker
Mm-hmm.
than they can.
Yeah.
So even if they stole your copy of your business today, by tomorrow it's out of date. And really, when we teach people to be entrepreneurial, never take your foot off the accelerator, because the day that you slow down and go, I think I've made it, is the day that your competitors are going to start eating your lunch.
Yeah.
So what about people who are working full-time and want to grow a business on the side? Brilliant question.
Yeah.
That's one of the smartest things you can do, but there is going to be a point in time where you have to make the transition. So the idea is simple. I'd suggest, because this is what I did, when I started this business, I was working in sales, and I started it on the side. And it's really hard. I'll be frank. It was really hard to actually concentrate and burn the candle at both ends. So I started losing my momentum in my sales career and my team. At the same time, I'm trying to build momentum in my coaching business. So I was testing it. I was looking for a market. I was testing the viability, and I was doing it all outside of hours.
Yeah.
Then I negotiated with my boss because I was transparent. And I said, look, I want to start this business, and I want to do it in my own time.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as it doesn't encroach, is that okay? And he said, fine. And we got to a stage where I started seeing that it was going to work, and that's when I told him I was leaving.
Yep.
Now, he asked me to stay in the building because he said, your knowledge is too valuable for us to just lose. And if you're not going to a competitor, how about we give you an office in the building so you can start your business here? It's a bit weird,
Yeah.
right? Because I go to work and everyone's going, I thought you left. And I was just going to a different space. But my point is this, you can work out a transition strategy.
Mm-hmm.
The real question is, how much money do you need to live? So what's known as cash burn. And if you've got a bank account that's got enough in it, you can take the punt. Most people, when they leave their job, the chances of getting that same job back is relatively good in the short term.
Okay.
Relatively good, as long as you're good at what you do.
Yeah.
And my suggestion is don't drop the ball. You've got to be good at what you do, number one, so that you're always desirable.
Yeah.
I sort of checked in with my boss and I said, look, if this doesn't work out in a year's time, would you have me back? And they said, well, of course we would, because of the value you provide. And that was my safety net. Right. The problem is I never looked back, because once I started running my own business, I realized that the freedom and flexibility was there.
Yeah.
So I think you can do it. You have to be pretty disciplined.
Yeah, and also getting over that fear of, the time when the time is right to give up your job. So, just not just moving out of fear.
Yeah.
And when your business is going to be successful, then
you have to move.
Taking those steps, you have to move.
Because imagine you have a foot in one boat and a foot in the other boat. Right? It's pretty difficult to keep your legs together. Right? Inevitably, you end up in the water.
Yeah.
So I think if your business looks like it's moving, you have to have a decision to move.
Yeah.
And you've always got the safety net that you can go backwards if you have to. But I think the life of an entrepreneur is a bit exciting. It's very different to being employed because you don't know what's coming tomorrow. The upside of that is it's adrenaline. The downside of that is it could be a cash flow issue.
Yeah.
But I think the education can be done early, so you can learn about business while you're still in a job. I think the testing of products you can do while you're still in a job. But once things start to pick up momentum, you have to move with the flow.
Yeah.
Or you'll starve the business, because the startup period of a business, the first couple of years, is pretty intense. And it's intense from the owner because I don't have the money to go and pay wages. No one's going to fund me if I've got no experience.
That's right.
So I'm just going to have to do it myself.
Yeah, it's not easy, We're not saying it's easy. It's it takes hours, and it takes passion, and it takes determination, and it takes a lot to get going. But
yes, yeah, absolutely does. So look, I've noticed that there's a couple of questions up there, but I think we've covered most of them, haven't we? Look, if anyone's got any other questions, I'm going to make a couple of suggestions. Annette's taken responsibility for building the intellectual property within the business school. She's quite happy to chat with people.
Absolutely.
And so what we need to do is, if you're curious about what you need to do to take your business idea or your current business from where it is now to the next stage, have a chat with her.
Yeah.
Right? Jump on the phone. I think we're going to put a link up to talk to one of our team. It's going to be Annette in this situation. And just really understand how we can possibly help you, or whether your business is even close to being viable, and how do we take this idea forward. because we've talked about a lot of ideas today, and the problem with a lot of ideas, it can be a bit overwhelming.
Mm.
I am going to suggest that if you have an idea, you almost owe it to yourself to get some idea as to whether it's viable. There's one last question. What is your advice if you don't have support from your family and friends? Oh, that's a whole other session, right? I will suggest that when you do go into business, everyone around you is going to freak out.
Yes.
Because when you're in a job, you get paid every week consistently, and there's some security around that. And the other thing I suggest to people is your friends and family may not agree with your decision to move. There's an old saying, when fishermen go out fishing for crabs, they grab them and they throw them into these massive buckets, and they never have to put a lid over the top of the bucket, because whenever a crab tries to escape, all the other crabs will grab it and drag it back in. And sometimes people do not like change, and people around you do not like change. So when you change, they go into fear.
Yeah.
And so they're going to have potentially a negative reaction to this idea of you becoming an entrepreneur, because they go, oh my God, what's going to happen? You shouldn't do it. You should stick with your knitting. You're really good at your job. All these sort of statements, they're statements of fear.
Yeah.
And you can use those to protect you and just make sure you've got a very clear plan in front of you. Or you can use those to stop you by saying, well, everyone else said it was a bad idea, therefore that's why I didn't do it.
Yeah.
Here's my problem, right? You get one shot at life, right? You get born, you've got a period of time that you're on the planet, and if something inside you says, I need to give my idea a go, you almost owe it to yourself to give it a go. I'm not saying all or nothing. I'm saying be prepared that you're going to get criticism from people when you go out with your ideas.
Yeah.
Be prepared that there's going to be naysayers that say this is risky and this is stupid. But if you don't actually go down the path of testing, executing, chatting about, you could be leaving a brilliant idea to die.
Yeah, that's right.
And we can't afford to do that in this world anymore, because there's too many problems that need solving.
Yeah.
There's too many opportunities that need fixing, and there's too many people that are scared to death of failure. But to me, the only failure in business is the failure to not give it a go.
That's right. And if you don't have family and friends, actually, it's not a bad thing, and this is so, like David said earlier, the reading of the books, the networking, there's so much information online, and you sometimes family and friends are actually a burden more so than a support to you.
They can be. And I'm not suggesting that's a generic statement, because sometimes they're very supportive.
Yeah.
But a lot of times they're going to be scared of you doing something that's not in your nature.
Yeah.
Just touching on that last thing, we talk about, people have so many questions about how to get my business started. So there's something that's available today that when I was starting was not available, right? And it's the most powerful resource on the planet, and it's sitting there in your pocket, and it's called Google. And you can Google any question that you have, and you will find multiple answers. In my day, there was an encyclopedia, and that was it. And you had to find an expert, and you had to find someone who knew the expert to get the information. These days, information is not the problem. There's more information than you can possibly digest in your whole life. The problem is movement.
Yeah.
There's an old saying, you can't steer a parked car. I cannot tell you if your business will be successful until we have some movement with your idea.
Yeah.
So I think that, the enemy of entrepreneurship is apathy or procrastination. And for people who don't do anything and just sit there asking everyone's opinion, they're going to end up nowhere, right? The reality is, for you to be successful in business, you have to give it a go.
Yeah.
You give it a go under controlled circumstances, you get some expert advice, you get the education you need, and you see what happens. And it's naive to think you're going to be successful every single time. The reality is, I had 2 business failures, which were pretty mammoth. It cost me a lot of money. And then I went and learned sales for 10 years before I actually found my calling. And sometimes you need to have some passion behind what you do in your business, because you're going to have bad days. Yeah. Bad days are part of good days. You can't have good days without bad ones, right? You need the contrast.
Yeah.
So I think having the passion for what your idea is or what you want to do, having the commitment to move forward, having the connections with people who can advise you in a meaningful way, so not just give you junk advice. And I'd suggest don't take advice from someone who hasn't had the experience.
Yes.
All right, because there's a lot of people out there that are going to tell you that you shouldn't start a business because I had an uncle who started a business and look at him. And don't listen to that.
Yeah.
Listen to people who have done it, really actually done it, and listen to the people who have made it. Because there are successful business owners out there. When we bring coaches on board here, the main thing I'm looking for is, what experience have you had? I don't want you to tell me how many books you've read. I want to know what experience you've had.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for someone to give you the advice, ask the question, what experience have you had in what I'm about to do? I suppose we're sort of coming to the end of the call. If there's any last questions, you can pop them in there. If not, feel free to reach out. I know that Annette's pretty keen to talk to people and help them with their specific issues, because I can give you generic advice on a webinar like this.
Yeah.
But when it comes to your specific situation, you need to talk to someone one-on-one. So please feel free to reach out and have a chat. The business school, if you're interested, jump on the website and have a look. That website will be updated as soon as we've established the product and the assembly of it. So throw your expression of interest in. There's no obligation on any of that. It's just really understanding whether our description of our product is suitable to the people who are looking to start up.
Exactly.
So other than that, Annette, thanks so much.
No, thank you.
It's been great to chat with you guys. I appreciate it. I really look forward to hearing about some of the success from you guys out there. At least give it a go, right? Because sometimes it's just that you owe it to yourself to take your idea and test it. And if you've got an idea that you think's worth testing, by all means, speak to someone and see if we can get it off the ground. Because there's nothing that I like to hear more than either, I don't mind if you succeed or fail, the fact that you tried. So let's get those businesses up and running, and let's see if we can sort of help with growing the economy as well.
Exactly.
Awesome. Thanks, Annette, so much
Thank you.
again.
Thanks, David.
And we look forward to hearing about your success, guys.
See you later.
Cheers. Okay,